Is it cold enough for you? Just about. Welcome to our Pinnacle Living Update meeting. Thank you for joining us. We have some members of the Pinnacle Living leadership team with us. Chris Henderson, our Chief Executive Officer. Did I hear a yay? We have Dan Nyman, who is our Chief Operating Officer. Thank you. We don't want anybody to feel left out. Kevin Salminen, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and Laura Jones, who is our Senior Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Operations. We will start with our presentation. We have incorporated the questions that were submitted. I will start out by saying we've received a lot of questions. Thank you for that. And what we've tried to do, and keeping this meeting to about an hour or a little bit over an hour, is combine a lot of those questions, and we'll address them throughout the presentation. If there's anybody after we are done who has a specific question that we didn't cover that was submitted, we'll stick around and you can come up and talk with us after the meeting. But thank you for joining us.
Good morning. As Amy said, my name is Chris Henderson, and I'm very fortunate and I serve as the President and CEO of Pinnacle Living. Appreciate you all coming out on this blustery cold morning to spend time with us, but as several people said, just wait till next week. The weather will be much worse. So we have checked our slides and we think we're in good shape. Hopefully we won't have to dim the lights or anything along those lines, but we'll just jump right into this. And this is just a summary of what we would like to cover today. And as Amy said, you all provided some really great questions. We've tried to incorporate a number of the questions into the slides, but what we decided to do, rather than wait to answer all those questions at the end, is that Amy's going to kind of MC the process, and as we go through slides, she may be asking a question. So if those questions generate more questions, please let us know. We're going to try to keep this to an hour, but again, we got about 40 questions from folks. So we appreciate you all doing that. We've done our best to address all of those in some way, shape, or form in this presentation. So very quickly, we want to spend just a little bit of time reminding everyone of our organizational structure. What is Pinnacle Living? Why do we use the name Pinnacle Living when our doing business as name is Virginia United Methodist Homes? What is who is a part of Pinnacle Living, and how is that structured? Kevin's going to spend some time talking about the financial structure of the organization. He's also going to talk about financial performance. And one of the things that you'll see this year, we decided to go back to 2020 in the olden days, pre-COVID, because so much has changed from an operation standpoint from the beginning of COVID to today. We thought sharing some numbers in that context would be beneficial. Now, as the Finance Committee knows, we provide what I think is a really good quarterly summary of financials, and that compares year over year. So we're not going to do the year-over-year comparison today. We want to do pre-COVID to today and highlight some of those numbers so that everyone can see just exactly what's happened in that regard, okay? We're going to talk about capital investments. And Amy has a question about major capital projects that are coming, and Amy's going to answer a number of these questions because they're in her wheelhouse or her responsibility, if you will. But as you know, there's been a lot done here. I just toured the newly occupied clinic for the first time this morning. I've been in pre-occupancy, but wow, what a great space. We've been waiting for that for a very, very long time, and it's nice to see that behind us. And it'll be really nice to get the windows and the EFS behind us as well. So we've got a few big projects that we're working towards and some numbers we want to share with you there. Dan Nyman is going to talk about some We Care Connect survey data. We know that Amy shares information about We Care Connect and Cedarfield. Dan's going to share both Cedarfield and Pinnacle Living so that you have a feel for where Cedarfield fits in with the We Care Connect surveys and how that all works for us. We want to talk about a new policy that our board has implemented that we think is going to provide more financial transparency to you. And we're going to lean heavily on the Residents Council and the Finance Committee for that, but we'll talk about that in some detail. We know that there are a lot of questions about Hermitage Deep Run and Hermitage 3 Chop, our new acquisitions, and we'll talk about those a bit. And then we'd like to spend some time talking about what the future holds and where we're going to go and what's next for Pinnacle Living and for Cedarfield. Does that sound okay with everybody? Great. So just very, very quickly, the mission of Pinnacle Living is enriching life's journey. Now, it seems as though there may be a little confusion on the part of some folks that Pinnacle Living is no longer Virginia United Methodist Homes, or Virginia United Methodist Homes was acquired by somebody and we became Pinnacle Living. That is not the case. The Methodist Home was founded in 1947. That's the original Hermitage Richmond. And we've been operating there as the Methodist Home, the Methodist Homes, the United Methodist Homes, and Virginia United Methodist Homes since that 1948 date. In 2017, our board of directors took a really close look at who we are and what we're doing and said, you know, fewer than half of the people we serve today are United Methodist. And to many people, the word home has a negative connotation. We all want to live in our home, but nobody wants to live in the home. Is that a fair assessment? And when we were Virginia United Methodist Homes, oftentimes we were referred to as the homes or the home. And that just has a negative connotation that we're caring for people when that's not the only thing we do. So our board really did a deep dive with a few consultants, and we did focus groups with then Cedarfield residents and all of our other communities. And the overwhelming response from everyone we talked to was, yeah, Virginia United Methodist Homes just isn't a very aspirational name, and it doesn't represent who we are. We are still connected to the United Methodist Church. We are still an agency of the United Methodist Church. And if you look at our disclosure statement, you'll see that your contractual relationship is with Virginia United Methodist Homes Incorporated, doing business as Pinnacle Living. Okay? So it is the same organization. Nothing has changed in that regard. So that's a key piece to this. When we rebranded to Pinnacle Living, we realized that our old mission statement was also kind of dated and sour. And that mission statement was something along the lines of provide facility services and programs to enhance the quality of life of older adults. Really a mission statement that could be adopted by any organization, for-profit, not-for-profit, faith-based, independent organization. And again, we wanted something aspirational. So when we rebranded to Pinnacle Living, we adopted the new mission statement of enriching life's journey. And we feel as though a big part of that enrichment is recognizing that a culture in which age doesn't define the person is incredibly important for not only Pinnacle Living, but for the world. We know that the world is graying every day. We know that age is becoming a less and less important part of a person's or an individual's impact on culture and society. We've got a president who is stepping down on January 20th and a president who is coming into the office on January 20th who could live in one of our communities. The world is different today, and a world in which age does not define the person is incredibly important to us. And then our values are held up by 6 pillars: culture, diversity, stewardship, partnership, hospitality, and quality. From an organizational standpoint, with our recent acquisitions, we've made some changes to responsibilities and structure. And this is our organizational chart as we sit today. In a minute, Kevin's going to pick up on this and talk about the financial structure of the organization. But from a pure organizational standpoint, the Pinnacle Living Board of Directors, that's a 12-member volunteer board of directors, 9-member volunteer board of directors, we have a total of 12 board members because of our Windsor Meet board, is made up of both United Methodists and non-United Methodists from across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we feel that diversity is important to us because as we look to the future, we know that there are going to be growth opportunities for Pinnacle Living outside of the areas we serve today. The Pinnacle Living Board of Directors elects the Windsor Meet Board of Directors, which is a 5-member board of directors, and they also elect the members to serve on our supporting organization. It's actually a 509A supporting organization by IRS code, and that 509A is in position to support Pinnacle Living and the mission of Pinnacle Living. That mission, again, is held up by that board of directors, and the board of directors works in that regard as they work through. I'm directly employed by the Pinnacle Living Board of Directors, and I serve as the president of Pinnacle Living, Windsor Mead, and the supporting organization. Dan serves as our chief operating officer. Charles Wickham, who some of you know, is our director of donor development. Our church relations position was Martha Stokes, and we've decided with Martha's retirement that we're just going to take a slight pause with that. So we've taken those responsibilities and spread them amongst several of us. And then Kevin is our CFO. Laura serves as our senior vice president for operations, sales, and marketing. And one of the challenges with our recent acquisitions was that, quite candidly, Dan had 9 direct reports, which for any one person was a bit too much. So we've asked Laura to take on some new responsibilities, and she's going to be supporting the executive directors and the teams in our in the 2 new Hermitage communities, Hermitage Richmond and Hermitage Roanoke. So that's that change there. You see that Dan is responsible for oversight of Laura, the vice president of clinical services, Tamika. I know Tamika's here, she's sitting up by James. I'm sorry, hi Tamika. Tamika just got back from vacation, so she's looking rested. Please help us change that. Rich Patone is our vice president for administrative services, and we are going to be recruiting a new vice president for sales and marketing. Dan also directly supports Amy and the Cedarfield team, and Andrea and the Windsor Mead team, while Laura, in time, will be responsible for supporting our 4 Hermitage campuses. So that's our structure as we sit today. And again, as we look to the future, we feel as though this structure will help us grow and help us evolve as an organization. Amy, I think there are a few questions.
Yes, there are. First question is, will you please let us know what the Pinnacle plan is for Hermitage 3 Chop and Hermitage Deep Run?
Yep, absolutely. And again, that's a big one. There was another question similar to that about the financial position of those 2 campuses. So I will tell you that we acquired those 2 communities for $10,250,000. The organization that we purchased those communities from purchased them in August of 2022 for just over $14 million. So the short answer is, today, they are not profitable. However, occupancy at Hermitage Deep Run is up to almost 70%. Occupancy at Hermitage 3 Chop is above 60%. There are 3 cottages across the street at 3 Chop. We've actually closed one of the cottages to save money, and we've compressed some staff in that regard. So we believe in time that they're going to be very effective providers of service and will help us broaden our reach. We have much greater diversity of our residents and our culture in those 2 communities than any of our other communities. We've embraced that and we're working towards that. Today, they are not in a cash positive position, but we believe in short order they will be, and we're starting to see occupancy growth in those 2 communities. So we're excited about that and what's going on in that regard.
Our next question is Cedarfield a nonprofit? If yes, what qualifies us to be a nonprofit?
So IRS standards for not-for-profit organizations is a unique science. It's not about community service. It's not about benevolent care. It's about what we do as an organization to support the greater community. And our 501c3 designation as a not-for-profit provider is set upon 3 issues. We provide housing and services to older adults, number 1. Number 2, we provide healthcare services to older adults. And number 3, we provide financial security to older adults. Those are the 3 tenets that our 501c3 charitable status is based upon. That enables us to take advantage of many IRS regulations, including the donor development program that we're working hard to grow here at Cedarfield.
The second part of that question is, are the 2 new acquisitions also nonprofit?
Yes, the 2 new acquisitions are also not-for-profit. So all of our organizations, Virginia United Methodist Homes doing business as Pinnacle Living, Windsor Mead, the Hermitage Capital and Reserve Corporation, and all of the communities that are under those bodies are all 501c3 tax-exempt organizations. So we have 2 tax ID numbers, or EIN numbers. Please don't ask me what EIN stands for. I have no clue. But Pinnacle Living with the 6 communities, I'm sorry, the 5 communities, Cedarfield, Hermitage Richmond, Hermitage Roanoke, Hermitage Deep Run, and Hermitage Three Chop are under one tax ID number, and Windsor Mead has a separate tax ID number.
The last part of that question is, do our volunteer hours have any relevance in our tax exempt status?
So the short answer is, from an IRS perspective, not really. We don't report those volunteer hours to the IRS. But from a local perspective, from a property tax exemption standpoint, they become very important. So as an organization, we do track that information and we want to know what's going on in that regard. So an example there, I serve on a separate board of directors for another United Methodist agency, United Methodist Family Services. I think some of you know me, who know me and have known me for a while, know that foster and adoption care is important to my wife and me. So Sarah and I have a 23-year-old foster son. Zaki is 23, and he's making decisions that 23-year-olds make, and we love him and we're supporting him in that. But I give back personally by being a member of the United Methodist Family Services Board of Directors. That's a personal issue. That's a personal volunteer act. That doesn't impact what we do here at Pinnacle Living. So those volunteer pieces and parts, if you're a volunteer in the greater community, please continue to do that, because volunteerism is important. But we do want to track internally your volunteer hours and the volunteer hours of others who come on site, and we do a pretty good job of that tracking.
Okay, our next question is, please explain why the board of directors has voted against a Cedarfield resident on the board of directors.
Yes, thank you. So, and I know that's a big question, and that's a hard question, and I know that the answer that I'm going to give you is not going to be appreciated by some. So the Pinnacle Living Board of Directors has always focused on the future and the continuation of the mission. It's Amy's job to focus on the here and now and the future of Cedarfield. We've got a great residence council here. You've got an incredible group of volunteer council members who interact with Amy and the leadership team here at Cedarfield every single day. So because of that, our board has opted not to have a resident on our board of directors. And as of yesterday, they have affirmed that decision. However, I'd like to work with Amy and the council and the residents council to create opportunities for us to bring board members in to meetings like this, perhaps to our budget meetings, so that you can get to know those board members and put a face and a name together, and they can hear from you directly. So over the next 12 months, Amy and I are going to be working hard on that with the council. Any other questions there, Amy? Next up, Kevin is going to come up and talk about our financial structure and our overall results of operations.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm the CFO for the company. It's a pleasure speaking with you. I've been with the company since April of 2005. Just briefly, this is the overall financial structure that Chris has talked about. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It just gives a different layout from the organization chart. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have on that at a later date, but I'm going to move forward. Okay, as Chris walks through the overall Pinnacle Living's strategic initiatives, it's critical we keep one factor in mind, our organization's overall cash position, and that is what this slide is trying to project. Every quarter, this information, as Chris mentioned, is available to the Finance Committee, and we're always happy to address any questions that we have. So let's start with the very top portion of the slide, and that's going to be the summary of the overall balance sheet. Really, where I want to focus is our overall cash position, our cash and investments. This includes, at least the slide includes, Pinnacle Living, Windsor Mead, and the HCRC. Chris talked about those earlier. And the key question is, does Pinnacle Living have the financial foundation to move forward with our future state? Something that Chris is going to be talking about a little later. And that is a resounding yes. So overall, our cash position for Pinnacle Living is around 86 to $87 million. And what I think of the HCRC, our supporting organization, our kind of our savings account that we move money to and we use it for strategic initiatives, has around $44 million. And that's going to be great when Chris talks and we talk what's going to be hold for the future of Pinnacle Living. I also understand financial statements is a different language for many individuals. Financial statements can be very complex. So what we did with this slide as well is we have simplified our cash position with all three entities and given a basic reconciliation. What did we receive with cash coming in and where did we spend that cash? And that is what the bottom part of this is trying to show us. Cash that came in 2024 from operations and entrance fees was $20 million. We spent that cash on capital expenses, much of which was here at Cedarfield. We paid debt. That is the debt we took out to help with the renovations and expansion at Cedarfield, and we put the remainder in savings. That's exactly what cash was spent on. This is the HCRC. When we move money to the HCRC, our supporting organization, our savings account, which we disclose to the Finance Committee, that is a proactive approach for financial stability for the organization in the long term that is free of debt covenant and restriction. That's a good thing. And that's a thing I think every resident would like to know and like to see. So we are confident moving forward in our overall financial footing for Pinnacle Living. And before I get to the next slide, Amy, I'd like for you to ask me question 1 on the financial structure because it moves forward to our next slide.
The rate of increase in monthly fees charged to residents in 2022, 23, and 24 was higher than previous decades due to inflationary pressures related to staffing, food, etc. Is this abating with inflation now below 3%?
The good news is when we focus on inflation, and this is what the next slide is going to show, our largest top 5 expenses for Pinnacle Living and for Cedarfield, and you're going to see they're basically the same, a little bit of a different order. In 2020 to 24, you're going to see that difference. The great news, as the question relates to, is over the last 6 months, when we started our fiscal year, June of 2024 to November of 2024, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, has goods and services on average of 2.7%. That's great. But what we also need to factor in is the cost of compensation. Over that same period of time, it's around 3.9%. And where you're going to see our focus is on our team members. It is our largest expense. We are in the people business after all. So what is going to be our rate increase, which I can tell you what our rate increase is going to be for when you get your rate adjustment letters at the end of April, is a resounding, I don't know. Right? Because we just completed our department area meetings as part of that new financial transparency model we're going to be talking about in a second. David just completed those with every department, with Amy. We have to put all that information together. We need to see what the variances were, what the capital needs are. We need to see what the services that you would like. We need to put that together and we need to say, okay, this is what the overall picture looks like. That's always what the rate adjustments are based on. So with that, you're going to see some pretty interesting numbers when we compare fiscal year ending 2020, May 31st of 2020 to May 31st of 2024, right at the beginning of COVID and everything we talked about. So let's talk about Pinnacle Living. Our people are number one. Our focus is on our people. And I got to compliment Chris, Dan, Amy, and all the executive directors. In 2020, when everything was going, things were getting to be in a little bit of trouble, they said, we're putting people first. We see the future of what's going on. We don't want to see nursing agency. We want to ensure our team members that we are competitive, that they want to be here. 26% overall increase from 2020 to 2024 for team members and benefits. We do a primary focus, what it would take to hire out a new person coming in. That is the basis of what we're focused on. We have a separate consultant that looks at overall our pay bands as well on this. And that consultant is very honest with us with where we need to be. And that's what you're seeing overall. Depreciation. the second largest line item. Why do I like seeing that increase? Because that means I'm spending money on capital projects, primarily here, and you're really going to see that on the Cedarfield slide. So the more we're spending in capital, the more we're depreciating, and that gives you the beautiful building that you're seeing around here. And you're also going to be happy to see we're not stopping on our capital expenses here at Cedarfield. We got more to come. Dining services. Not only did food costs increase overall, but what we saw are paper product increases as more takeout orders are being ordered now as well. People found in COVID-19, hey, I love the food here, let me take it out, let me take it back to my apartment, I can watch TV, I can eat, I can do whatever it is I like to do. Well, those paper products jumped overall in price. And don't be fooled by the last two. These are tricky. Utilities, okay Kevin, it's your Pinnacle Living, your fourth largest expense, but it was even from 2020 to 2024. I think everyone loves Mark Collins, but we need to give him a big thank you because it's not even. When you look at the detail in the numbers, especially with the new buildings, electric and gas, not only for Cedarfield have gone up, but they went up entirely for the entire company. What went down? Mark negotiated good phone pricing. That phone pricing went down tremendously on what we were seeing. When you look at the comparative nature of it, I got to thank Mark Collins on that because he did a lot of the negotiating on that a few years ago to drop that price. So we do see electricity and gas going up. We counterbalance that with our phone costs going down. Contract services, you might see that's equal. No. Nurse agency was a huge expense to us from 2020 to 2022 when Chris and Dan said, no, we're paying our team members instead. So the millions of dollars we were spending in nurse agency are now zero. So why is that number the same? Well, the number is same simply because we've moved that money to different areas. From security to grounds, we moved the money to a paperless system that we are working at organizationally. So we were paying to help out with that. But most of all, not most of all, it's a minor part of it, but we're also paying for our overall dashboards, for our company dashboards. And this is where I want you to ask the CARF question, if you would, please.
What is the rating of the bonds issued by Pinnacle? No, sorry.
Financial ratios?
Okay, sorry. There are CCRCs that compare their financial ratios and other key data to certain benchmarks in a separate document as a marketing strategy. Has Pinnacle Living considered this approach?
So I want to talk about everything we're doing in terms of ratios, dashboards, all that good stuff. First off, that dashboard project is great as an operational tool for all of our executive directors and department directors. So we not only compare ourselves for that, but really what this question is getting at is our financial ratios and benchmarks. And yes, we do benchmark them, but we benchmark them to our accrediting body, the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, CARF. We always call it CARF. And everyone here remembers about 15 to 24 months ago, we had our CARF survey, and we did we passed that thing resoundingly. Thank you, Amy, for that. And thank you to the entire Cedarfield team for that. You should be, that is a big achievement because CARF gives you comfort within our policies, procedures, and our financial metrics, and they meet with you and they discuss it with you. Not only that, we take about 7 to 9 of those ratios and we budget those to our operations. The board of directors gets those ratios every single board meeting. Not only do they get those ratios, but we give those on our bondholder statements, which are provided in public on the Emma repository system, and we also provide that to the finance committee. So you are seeing exactly what the board is seeing. You can answer, we have to maybe answer similar questions to what our board of directors is answering as well. So we're very proud that we are benchmarking to our accrediting body, and that's where we should be benchmarking to. So when we look briefly at the Cedarfield expenses, we see all the same, basically expenses, but look at Cedarfield's salaries and benefits compared to Pinnacle Living in total, a higher percent. We see depreciation, a higher percent overall. Contract services, we're spending it here at Cedarfield, dining and utilities as well. So now let's talk about the fun stuff, because no one really cares about finance and accounting except the finance committee. So any finance committee here, thank you for being here. So not to bore you too much, but look at how much we have spent in overall capital dollars. This is amazing. Since 2000, you might recall, if some of you were here back in 2015 when Chris started our program of what we wanted Cedar Field to look like. And those meetings took about 2 years. From those meetings, you got a new wellness building, we have new IL, we got a new health center building. It just took what seemed to be around 95 years to build. Thank you, COVID-19, for that. So thank you for your patience for that. But you take a look at all the capital that was spent there. When we look at this year, we have spent approximately around $4.6 million, a lot of that in the building renovation. You're looking at the hall here. Chris talked about the clinic earlier. FF&E was basically for this space here, a little bit in the clubhouse. Same for information technology. And then, of course, resident renovations, bringing new friends in to the overall building. So Amy, I'd like to answer the question that you were asking about the bond ratings, because in order to do these capital projects, we needed to take out debt for those capital projects.
Okay, so the question is, what is the rating of the bonds issued by Pinnacle Living and its subsidiaries?
What if I told you that the world has changed a little bit on bond ratings? Typically, you think of the bond ratings and you say, wow, investment grade. They're a investment grade, and it drops to a B. What do you think? Oh my gosh, what's going on? What's wrong? What if I told you that is beginning to change, especially in the life plan community business? In fact, you should almost think of the rating agencies and in the life plan community segment almost like stocks. It's going to go up and down, and why is that? Well, Standard & Poor's basically said we're moving out of the life plan community market. They take care of a few communities. Fitch is your 800-pound gorilla in this market. We met with Fitch at the last Ziegler, James and I did at the last Ziegler CFO conference last year. And Fitch basically what they will do is you only really now at this stage want to get a rating before you take out a massive part of debt, if you can. And what Fitch will do, no matter your days cash on hand, which is how much cash and investments you talk about, no matter how well off you are, they are going to downgrade you as soon as you take out additional debt. That is basically their new model because you have additional liabilities that you have to incur. That's why if we ever do get rated, expect this a little bit, expect an ebb and flow. And we'll explain that to the Finance Committee as well. But why didn't we do it before? Because there was no reason. Back in 2005, going up to every time we took out debt, the spread between an investment graded and non-investment graded debt was so small, it wasn't worth getting rated at the time. It was around 25 basis points.
Yeah, Kevin, talk about the spread.
Yeah, so the spread is what we call a basis point. I'm going to explain that to you because the Fed talks about this too. And see, accounting people try to act smart with our words, but it's really like balancing a check, but it's simple. So a spread is simple. When I say there's a 25 or 25% basis point spread, that's 0.25%. That's all it is. So 100 basis points is 1%. So when the Fed comes to you and they say we're reducing rates by 25 basis points, it's a 0.25% or a quarter. Well, that's basically what the spread had been when we were analyzing investment grade to non-investment grade debt. Didn't make sense. However, Fitch does do a service for you, if you like. They'll do a verbal service. This is a off the market, you give us your financial statements, and we'll go ahead and do a quick analysis of where we think you'll fall. And then if you want to pay for it, and they do charge, they can give you different levels of service as well. So I did the off book. I was just curious for Pinnacle Living and for Windsor Mead, because they're two separate employment identification numbers, or EINs. That we have. So Pinnacle Living was a BBB, investment grade bonds, which is great. So if we ever wanted to do something for Pinnacle Living, we would be investment grade as we expected. We basically have been BBB since I've been here through talking to different bankers. Windsor Mead, non-investment grade. Well, there's a simple reason for Windsor Mead being non-investment grade. It's because Windsor Mead is doing an excellent job of reducing its refundable entrance fees. I know you're not Windsor Mead, you don't care about that, but I want you to know the reason for it. And Windsor Mead has done a great job managing moving those entrance fees from a 90% refundable down to 50% in declining balance contracts. So those are the reasons, and even Fitch said, I wouldn't do anything, and so did our banker, until you really want to take out a massive amount of debt. There's no reason to even focus on it at this stage. Okay, any other questions?
Yep, one more question. How many entities under the Pinnacle Living umbrella have positive free cash flow? Are there plans to turn around those without positive cash flow?
It's a loaded question. All right. In fiscal 2024, it's actually a pretty easy question. Hermitage Richmond had a positive cash flow. Cedarfield had a positive cash flow. Pinnacle Advantage had a positive cash flow. And Roanoke did not have a positive cash flow. And so the good news is the communities did very well overall in terms of what we were wanting them to do. But I want to get back to that nonprofit status that Chris was talking about. It was interesting. Chris and I had an IRS audit back in 2007, 8, something of that nature. The IRS person came in and they said, well, it's time. You got randomly selected and we want to just see if you're a 501c3. And so they toured Hermitage Richmond. And this is how he stated it to us when we were having our exit meeting. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but he said, I looked around and you had a building. Okay, we're providing facilities. Oh, you have a bunch of older adults here. That seems like exactly what you were saying. So you're providing housing for them, yeah. And you're providing healthcare services for them. I'm seeing that. So he said, I kind of think you're meeting your healthcare need, but also we're providing support. That's a key in this as well. Financial support. And that's really, and think about nonprofit statuses. That's also what Roanoke is. We're providing support right now as we plan, and Chris and the team are planning, and the board of directors, on what we can do. Our first focus has been Hermitage Richmond, and we are focused there on the repositioning of Hermitage Richmond, and there have been some announcements there. But we're using that same information to try to also focus on Roanoke. But that financial service is very important. Keeping that nonprofit status, this is what I don't think we have to realize. We don't pay income tax because we're a nonprofit. But our legislators also gave us credit here in the county of Henrico County, where we are exempt for real estate and personal property. Whereas Windsor Mead has to pay almost $1 million in real estate tax, which is half the size of this community. Think about what we would be paying Henrico County if we also didn't get that tax exemption based on our nonprofit, which is probably over $2+ million. So that is really critical in us showing that we are a charity providing financial services, housing needs, and health service needs to residents. So I hope that answers that question for you. Is that it? Great. Well, Dan's going to come up here and talk about the We Care Connect survey and what the results are for that.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Dan Nyman, and I serve as the Chief Operating Officer. I'm going to talk about our overall resident satisfaction, and as many of you know, you participated in surveys, and I thank you for that. We all thank you for that. Called We Care Connect. It's done initially on your move-in. It's done, I think, after 45 or 90 days, and it's done annually. And we really rely upon that data to tell us how we're doing, and we use a third party so that we can assure that the data that we receive is valid. And so I've got, there's a few slides that I'd like to share with you today. First is on our overall resident satisfaction. And for the entire organization for Pinnacle Living, we come in at about 84%. And you know, a number without a metric is just, you can't put it in context. So I want to share what that is. So Windsor Mead is at about 83. Hermitage Richmond is at 84, Roanoke is at 84, and Cedarfield's overall satisfaction is 85. The good news is that our overall peer data that we compare ourselves against is 78. So Cedarfield is running at approximately 6 points over the average for We Care Connect. We Care Connect has 1,500 communities in their database, mainly not-for-profit, and about half of those are continuing care retirement communities. So we feel that the data that we're looking at and that we're analyzing is valid. Next, we look at our highly dissatisfied residents. That number is 74 at Windsor Mead, 65 at Cedarfield, 63 at Roanoke, and 62 in Richmond. They all exceed the benchmark. Cedarfield being 65, And again, our overall peer data that we're looking at is a 60 percentile. So again, about 5 points over that. This is an interesting one, and there's probably 70 or 80 data points that we look at, and I love numbers like Kevin. I could sit here all day and talk about numbers, but I'm just going to share the high points. Our residents happy living at Pinnacle Living, and our overall score being 72. And if you look at where they're coming from, Cedarfield's at 64, Windsor Mead's at 73, Roanoke's at 81, and Richmond is at 84. Again, all exceed the benchmark, which happens to be 60. And so we're pleased with our scores. Couple of additional scores is dining services. Overall 77. I'll tell you, that's an incredible number for an organization, and Cedarfield being at 82 is amazing. Neil and the team up in dining have done an incredible job. You know, sometimes the peas are too mushy and sometimes they're not mushy enough, and there's no way you can possibly satisfy everybody. So the dining score is really impossible. A lot of the national companies that run dining services will tell you, you know, if you can get over 75, you're doing pretty well. And so our overall company scores at a 77. And again, you can see the details, 71 at Cedarfield, at Windsor Mead, 75 at Roanoke, Richmond 75, and then 82 at Cedarfield, and the benchmark being 63. So you can tell, you know, where we stand as an organization comparative to our peers around the country. The last one I want to talk about is our quality of care, and this mainly has to do with our healthcare services. And again, our overall company score comes in around an 87. Richmond at an 87, Cedarfield at an 87, Roanoke at an 87, and Windsor Mead at an 88. So all fairly consistent. And you know, nonprofit continuing care retirement communities tend to run a higher quality in general. Our staffing tends to be higher. So putting everything in context, we are running at the national average. And lastly, what's really important is that we just received from We Care Connect, I told you they have about 1,500 communities in their database. We just received the Senior Care's Best Award from them, which means that we're in the top 25% of the database on all of the questions that are being asked of you residents. So that, again, I think that solidifies for us that things are going well here in terms of a resident satisfaction standpoint. And I think that's where we're going to stop. I think you have a question.
Yep, I have a question for you. The New York Times has cited 90% occupancy at CCRCs as a benchmark for positive financial viability and market demand for the CCRC services. Is this a reasonable standard, and what is the outlook for occupancy at Pinnacle Living Communities and at Cedarfield?
Well, let me get my crystal ball about the occupancy, and we can kind of go from there. So first of all, we benchmark ourselves, as I told you with We Care Connect, but more importantly, we use the CARF. You heard Chris and Kevin talk about CARF, the Commission on Accreditation of Rehab Facilities. It used to have a slash after that. It's called the Indian Care Accreditation Commission, and they tried to shorten their name. So basically, we use an outside service again to benchmark ourselves for a lot of different things. And we're fortunate here that at Pinnacle Living, Amy happens to be a CARF surveyor. She does several CARF surveys a year around the country, their peer surveys. And also Rich Batone, who's our Vice President of Administrative Services, serves as a surveyor. So we get some great insight. I always call it, you know, you go out and you find the best practices and you're able to bring them back to your community and implement them. So being a consultant or a surveyor, if you will, is really a great feather for you all, because it allows Amy to learn other best practices and bring them back here for something that we like free. And so it works really well. The CARF accreditation is a seal of approval from the external rating organization. Similar, a lot of you worked in healthcare over the years, the Joint Commission or JCO, or they kind of accredit hospitals, health systems. That's similar what we have with CARF here in senior living. The participation in CARF is voluntary, and I think the numbers are down they're lower, aren't they, Amy? I think the number's around 10% of life care communities in the country decide to get themselves accredited. And so I think, again, we are in a minority of folks who are trying to assure that our quality of care and our services is where it needs to be. And I think that answers the question.
Just one more while you're there. Can you talk about our Medicare rating and the fact that we're Medicare certified now?
Sure. So Medicare, if you go to CMS Nursing Home Compare, it's a public website that CMS runs. I don't believe we are on, so it takes a year to 18 months to get a nursing home rating. If you look at Windsor Meads, you'll see it's a 5-star. They've operated their Medicare, I think it's Windsor Mead has operated their Medicare certified service since 2008. So they have a long track record and actually the CMS rating started in 2009. And so we will need to operate our Medicare neighborhood for about a year before we'll get a rating. And that'll happen, so we'll probably see a rating start probably I'm thinking next summer sometime at best. And so you can look out for that, but internally we use, as I said, the We Care Connect data. We use a software package. I don't want to get too in depth, but we use a software package called Point Click Care. It's PCC, if you've heard our staff talking about it. It has quality measures that benchmark us against nationally everybody else who uses that electronic medical record. So from now until next summer, we can determine our quality based upon those quality measures that are in the Point Click Care software program. And afterwards we'll continue to use that as well. We also use another one that does it as well. But the ratings in CMS are kind of an outside rating by the Medicare services and are a good barometer, but I think the programs that we use internally are better.
Okay, we've spent a little bit of time looking back. Now I'd like to spend some time looking forward, and then we'll talk about questions. So up next is a new policy that our board has approved that we want to implement, and it deals with financial transparency. I will tell you that Cedarfield has always had a really, really strong resident finance committee. Going back to my time as the executive director here, all the way through, people like Walton Turnbull, when I was the executive director here, really helped us get off on the right foot with our finance committee. Many of you remember Sam Dario, who was finance committee chair for a long, long time. Longer than Carol, I think. Yeah. And now Ms. Marco is doing that work for us now. And we have a great finance committee, and that finance committee really asks tough questions. And that's an important part of what we do every day. We want you to ask those tough questions. So going forward, we've kind of formalized the process that we want to use to engage the finance committee and you all as we look to the financial success of Cedarfield and of Pinnacle Living. I think this meeting and the upcoming budget meeting that we'll have in April are two really important meetings associated with that. But more important than that are the 10 months that Amy is working with the finance committee and David and James and Kevin and really talking about what's happening and what's going on. So on a monthly basis, we're going to encourage the finance committee to meet with David and the team to talk about occupancy, staffing. We know that there's a lot of interest with you all with your donor funds, and we want to talk about how we're spending those monies on a monthly basis. And then on a quarterly basis, and remember, our fiscal year is a little odd. It's June 1 to May 31, so we're not on a traditional fiscal year. But on a quarterly basis, Kevin shares that quarterly financial information that we make publicly available on the municipal bond index. with the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee reviews that on a regular basis. And we want to formalize that and continue to do that work because we think that's an important part of the communications piece here at Cedar Field and at Windsor Beach and all of our communities. Along with that, you're going to hear Amy and David working to beef up the quarterly reports in town meetings and talking about exactly what the Finance Committee is seeing and what's going on in that regard. And then budget development's an important one. And there were a number of questions that we received as to how do residents give input into capital needs, into operating needs. I remember way back, there was a fellow by the name of Jerry Thomas who was active with our Finance Committee when I was executive director here, and Jerry said, when is enough enough? Isn't it somebody's time to tell us when enough is enough? And I'm a Yankee and I can be a little flippant sometimes, and it's like, that's not my job, that's your job. You have to tell us when enough is enough. So as we look to the future, we know that salaries are going to continue to increase. If you look at the pay rates that people are receiving, that's going to create additional pressures for us, not just in the past, but long term. And every organization is seeing that. And sadly, you're seeing a lot of for-profit organizations who have done a number of layoffs in the past 60 days to bolster their balance sheets at year end. So that's going to continue to be a challenge for us. But we want to involve the residents and your council committees in those discussions. And Kevin mentioned it just a little while ago. Amy and David and the department directors, David, you finished those meetings, haven't you? Yep, those meetings have all wrapped up and we appreciate everyone's input there. But we want to do that better and better every year. So this is the year we've kind of introduced that. And in future years, we want to really beef that up so that we can get more information from you before even Kevin puts out the budget package and says, okay, David, it's time for you to really earn your keep over the next 60 days. So that's going to be an important part of what we do in the coming months as well. And then another piece of that is our audit transparency. And last couple of years, we've invited the council presidents to come to our Pinnacle Living office. Frank was here this year. Ann came to us last year. I got to tell you, those are really exciting meetings. No, they're not. But the important piece there is that our audit firm is employed by our board of directors. Kevin and his finance team with James and David and everyone else do an exceptional job of developing our financial statements. Exceptional. This year, there were no audit adjustments for the third year in a row. Yeah, the third year in a row, I believe. And when we do make an audit adjustment, it's Kevin going to the auditors and saying, I screwed up this spreadsheet again. And I know which spreadsheet it is so that we can work on that. So that's an important part, but our board of directors employs our auditor. So Frank and Ann, in the past couple of years, have been coming to those meetings. I hope they found those beneficial because they have an opportunity to sit with the auditor, to sit with our audit committee, and really listen to the auditor deliver that report in its most raw state. And that's been a plus, and we want to continue to do that as well. And then the other piece of it that I mentioned earlier is this year, Amy and I want to work with the council, and we want to bring board members into these important meetings so that you have an opportunity to put names and faces together, and so that they can hear what you have to say to us. And that's an important part of where we are. So we're excited about this transparency piece and looking forward to moving forward with that. Now this, I apologize. It's impossible to read. I'm not going to ask you to read it, but we're going to make these slides available to everybody at the end of the meeting. They'll be on Amanda's desk. If anybody wants copies of them, yep, Amanda just gave me a thumbs up in the back. And you can take a look at this from that piece of paper. But this is the strategic initiative program that our board adopted a couple of years ago. Now, admittedly, COVID and staffing have slowed us down on where we want to be with this, but I want to talk about what's next. There are two guiding principles, the top long blue bar and the bottom long blue bar. And that's resident satisfaction, engagement, and financial success, and working through our mission and living our mission. And how are we doing that is the important part. And I hope this is a little easier to read. So we've adopted 6 key areas of strategic initiatives that we're working towards. And again, this is in the document that you can pick up after the meeting. From an internal standpoint, we're focused on people and culture. And Kevin mentioned that, Dan mentioned that. We didn't talk too much about team member engagement with We Care Connect, but that's an important part of what we do as well, and that's been very successful for us. Growth readiness and governance are the three internal pieces that we're working on. And you can see that there are 7 strategic initiatives that we're working through there. Achieve a targeted turnover rate of less than 30%, a retention target of 75% across all operating entities, and the Pinnacle Living support team. We didn't hit the 30% this year. We actually hit 35%, which was much better than last year on turnover, but not where we want to be. But our retention rate is now at 80%. So we're really happy with that. And things are moving in the right direction there. A culture of accountability. And that goes back to We Care Connect, your satisfaction and what you're telling us with that. We want to establish a clear process for identifying, vetting, and securing affiliation partners. We're going to park affiliation partners for just a minute. We're going to come back to that if we can. And we want to create a clear talent development and deployment pipeline. We've got awesome team members here. And like most healthcare providers and most service providers, we've gone to really awesome team members, and I'm going to pick on Emily because she's sitting right here in my vision. And we're going to go, Emily, you're an awesome salesperson, and today you're the director of sales and marketing. And Emily goes, what? So we want to equip our really awesome team members with the tools to help them grow in their positions. And we're working through that. We've done our first Pinnacle Living Leadership Academy. It was a 12-series program. We've identified leaders from across all 6 of our campuses, brought them together 12 times with a coach, and we've done individual coaching and group education with that group. And we're going to continue to do that kind of work because we have incredible team members here, and we want everyone to grow here. And a key part of growth is not everybody can stay and grow. There's only one executive director in the community. And if a team member is at the point where they want to grow and we don't have an opportunity for them, I believe that as an employer of choice, we need to support that person in helping them get to that next level, perhaps outside of Pinnacle Living or outside of Cedarfield. And oftentimes that's hard because it's a really good person that leads us. But that's got to be where we are as an organization. We're never going to grow enough that the 300 plus team members at Cedarfield will all grow into an executive director position. By the way, most don't want to do that. And that's okay too. That's okay too. There are only a few crazy people like Amy. Fortunately, we found one, and she's doing good work. But as we look to growth of our team members, we know that that's going to create some opportunities for them away from Pinnacle Living and away from Cedarfield, and we need to support that as well. And that's an important part of who we are. We want to foster practices that support a fully engaged, educated, and forward-thinking board. And we spend 2 big chunks of board meetings annually focused on that education piece. Yesterday, we talked about good governance. We talked about the roles and responsibilities of the board, and that's what grew into the conversation of board members coming to Cedarfield to be a part of these conversations. We want to integrate technology into all business practices. You all know that we had some real hiccups with the camera that's pointing at me in the back of the room. It's working okay now, but we've got a lot of work to do in that regard. Mark Collins has done a great job as our corporate director of information technology. We service 1,300 residents and 1,000 team members with 3 employees, Mark and 2 other people. And then we have a few contractors who do work for us as well. You've seen a guy walking around with a big beard, our structured cabling guy, Steve. Don't get him started about JMU marching band, by the way. If there are any Dukes in the room, don't talk to Steve about marching band. His son is a 5th-year marching Royal Duke, and he loves marching band. But we rely on a small cadre of team members to do that work for us. As we grow and evolve, we want to focus that work and really focus on how technology can make us all better and how we can deliver better services to you through technology. And you're going to be seeing that work. And then we want to align and continuously measure our leadership outcomes. What does that mean? How is Amy doing? How is Kate doing? How is Emily and David and James doing? Are we doing what we need to do to lift up our strategic initiatives to better our organization? And then there are 3 areas from an external standpoint that we want to focus on that we know we need to do better on. We've got 8 targeted strategic initiatives here. I'm not going to go into those, but there's some detail there. And if you'd like to talk about those after you receive this document, give me a call. I'd love to chat with you about them. As we look to the future, though, we know that Cedarfield can be a better place. We feel as though we are an employer of choice in every market we serve. And our retention and our team member engagement and satisfaction is an important part of that. There are very, very few organizations who have completely eliminated nursing agency utilization across this country. We're one of very few. I know there's another group in Tidewater that hasn't used agency for a number of months, but I think we're the only 2 providers in the Commonwealth who are not using agency at this time. And that's something that Tamika and our directors of nursing and our administrators work on every single day. It's not an easy switch to flip, excuse me. That was a tongue twister for me. So we've got a lot of work going on in that regard. When I was here a couple of months ago talking about Hermitage Deep Run and Hermitage 3 Chop, I mentioned that we're looking at redevelopment of our Hermitage Richmond community. Some of you will remember that. We have submitted a special use permit with the City of Richmond. And if you've never dealt with the City of Richmond in any way, shape, or form, I will tell you that it's one of the most painful processes you can ever go through. But we're gonna get there. We've submitted a special use permit application to redevelop Hermitage Richmond. And as Kevin said earlier, Hermitage Richmond is at a positive cash flow standpoint, and we're proud of that. But we can do better, and we will do better. So we've submitted a plan to develop 160 new independent living apartments and 72 assisted living and memory support residences in total. Our new Hermitage Richmond will not have any nursing care at all. And that's because as we've aged and evolved, and there was a great question that, by the way, went way over my head about bioscience and technology and people living older. People are living older, but people are still needing support services. And that's one of the challenges that we see as a future opportunity for us. So one of the reasons we grew assisted living here is because we can do more in assisted living today than we ever could in the 10 years, 20 years, 30 years past. Assisted living is going to become a more and more important part of who we are and what we do. That's also eliminating the entrance fee component, we believe is going to help us from a social demographics and financial demographic standpoint. Some people just don't see the value in paying the entrance fee you paid to live in this community, but they need support services and they need to live in community. So we're breaking down those barriers, and our Hermitage Richmond campus will be a 100% rental community. And we're focusing on affordability, we're focusing on integration, we're focusing on the community at large, and we feel as though we're going to be very successful in that regard. Hermitage Roanoke, as Kevin mentioned, is our big stumbling block. We struggle in the city of Roanoke. Roanoke's a beautiful city, but from an economic standpoint, it struggles. It's a tight financial market. So we're looking at that and working hard to figure out what's next for us in the Roanoke Valley. And then as we look at affiliations and partnerships like LifeSpire and Affirmation Home Health, we're going to have successes and we're going to have challenges. We're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs before we find princes that we can truly align with and be successful with. But as an organization, if we're not forward thinking and looking to the future and looking to align with other like-minded organizations, we're not going to be successful. In this day and age in senior living, we can't stagnate. So those are just a few pictures, just quick snapshots of who we are and what we're looking for in the future. Amy, I think we've got a bunch of questions that we need to get to. It is 7 minutes after 5. Is everyone okay if we take another 10 or 12 minutes to address some of the questions, and then we'll open up to the floor? Is that okay? All right, great.
Okay, great. Chris, what are the most significant challenges over the next 3 to 5 years for CCRCs generally and for Pinnacle Living specifically?
Workforce are the first 3 big ones, if you will. We know that as we evolve as an organization, we've got to maintain our status as an employer of choice. Because without the team members that do the exceptional work here, your level of satisfaction will plummet, okay? So workforce is a key piece of what we're looking at, what we focus on every single day. Amy, the other executive directors, Dan, Laura, Kevin, Tamika, and I meet every Tuesday morning. And one of our big questions is vacancies. We've got 997 full-time and part-time team members as of last pay period. About 1,000 team members as of our last pay period in our 6 communities. We have 16 vacancies for full-time positions out of 1,000 team members. It's less than 2%. That's a vacancy rate that most organizations would love to have. Workforce is an important part of that. Unfortunately, uncontrollable cost escalation. As we look to the future, we hit the refinancing and the new debt for Cedarfield with this expansion at exactly the right time. New construction costs and financing costs are exorbitantly higher than what they were when we started this project. So workforce and those uncontrollables of construction cost escalation, which by the way isn't projected to change anytime soon, and inflationary risk are 2 big ones that we're focused on as well. Not something we control. We can control as a huge external factor, but we need to be mindful of it and work smart in that regard. We have unbelievable tax-exempt debt rates for Pinnacle Living and for Windsor, and we protect those every single day. And then the last key piece that we need to focus on is you. We know that people are living longer. We know that people are focused on different lifestyles. And we know that not everybody wants to live in a community like Cedarfield. So as we look to the future, we believe there's always going to be that small percentage of people like you who want the security of a Cedarfield or a Windsor. Conversely, we know that there are a lot of other people who want to stay at home. They don't see the value of that level of engagement that you all have. And as we look at that home component, that forces people to really make tough decisions towards the end of their life. My parents live in a Presbyterian community in my hometown in Washington, Pennsylvania. My dad's 85. Quite candidly, it's a fee-for-service community, and my dad's on the cusp of needing assisted living services. And we're struggling with affordability in that regard. And a lot of people are stuck in that position as they age. So keeping residents healthy, active, engaged, and independent for as long as possible is really the third piece of that stool that we're focusing on hard.
Actually, the next question is for me.
Yes.
What coordination is there with the Finance Committee on all important strategic plan issues for Cedarfield? Do residents have the opportunity to comment on drafts, as is done in our communities in the Richmond area, other communities in the Richmond area? Is the final plan shared with residents? So the strategic plan is developed by our board of directors, the Pinnacle Living leadership team, which includes me as the executive director. And I bring to that meeting input that I get from residents as well as team members. The executive directors in each of our communities serve as our residents' voice and address any concerns or desires that are brought to our attention. Feedback comes from a variety of different sources, including meetings like this, resident council meetings, ad hoc meetings, people who just drop by my office with suggestions, which I love, by the way. And then we outline the future plans with the residents through the council and other means of meetings. In the past, Chris and Dan have also come and shared key points of our strategic plan with specifically the Finance Committee, and we expect to continue all of these practices. The next question is for Laura. Several years ago, the director of residential communities at Leading Age was quoted in a New York Times article on CCRCs. He stated that those born in the late 1930s and baby boomers are much more thorough in their research of CCRCs than in previous generations. Is this impacting how Pinnacle Living approaches the market and the type and extent of information provided to prospective residents?
So it does have an impact on what we do. I think one of the things that Emily and her team are doing very well is we want to get to know each person individually. So not only are we talking to the baby boomers, but we're talking to a bunch of individuals. So I think one of the keys to our success has been getting to know each person individually. What are they interested in? What do they like? What don't they like? What are their wants? What are their needs? And then tailoring the information we provide, the tours that we do, the events that we invite them to meet their specific needs. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, so everybody who comes gets the same look at Cedarfield. It really is tailoring it to the needs of each person.
Thank you. The next one is also for you, Laura. When organizations such as Newsweek rank CCRCs both nationally and by state, what criteria are they using? Why do you feel that Covenant Woods is ranked number 4, Lakewood 5, and Cedarfield number 8?
So honestly, we have no idea about the criteria that Newsweek used. And I would add, if you look at the criteria, Windsor Mead wasn't even considered in the criteria. So that's a little baffling to us. So as we've talked about earlier today, we really look at the CARF standards and those benchmarks. We think that that accreditation is important, and those benchmarks put us in a better position to be compared against communities versus Newsweek and our uncertainty about their criteria and how they came up with the ranking on that list.
The local TV ads about Cedarfield are abysmal and do not represent residents or the life at Cedarfield. Who is responsible? What is the cost of one of these ads?
So, wow. So that question, as you might imagine, we have people who like and appreciate the ads, we have people who are neutral about them, and we have some people who don't like them. And we understand and appreciate that. And I think with some residents that I've talked to, we've sort of agreed to disagree. The goal of our advertising is to engage with people, and that is working. We have people reaching out to us, calling us, and engaging with us. And yes, even people who may not appreciate the ads. But again, the goal is to get people to engage with us, to reach out to Emily and her team, for them to invite them to come, as I said earlier, find out what their wants and needs are, and to get them, to invite them in to interact with you all so they can appreciate the wonderful community that we have here.
The next question is also about ads. The current campaign has been running for more than a year. How much has it cost, and how do we measure its effectiveness? Who is our target audience, and why do we advertise on television late at night and usually on ESPN? I'm watching ESPN late at night. Are they capturing data relative to our print ads versus our television advertising?
Battery died on the microphone.
Okay, Laura, will you join me up here to answer this question while we get another battery?
So we typically run, our ad campaigns typically run for 12 to 18 months. So the first campaign that we did has come to the end of its useful life, and we have a new campaign that was introduced in the fall. So some of the advertising that we do targets, and this is interesting to a lot of people, it targets, it gets to know your preferences, and it will target ads to you. So depending on how you're receiving your television, so if you're getting it in a way that's streaming, it looks at your age, your demographic, and all of those things. So sometimes you might be receiving our ads on a channel that might seem interesting, but it's because those ads are targeted to the people that are watching those programs. So it follows you, not the program, if that makes sense.
Emily, is that microphone working? Great. Okay, one more question for Laura. Putting aside goat carts, goats, trick-or-treaters, has the advertising agency thought of gathering a group of residents and forming some sort of focus group? Residents could provide input as to their own decision-making process when choosing a CCRC and why they selected Cedarfield. That group or another resident group could be used to vet television and print ads before we use them.
So it's a great question. We did do that 2 years ago. So we did several focus groups with Cedarfield residents and with team members here at Cedarfield, and that was a little less than 2 years ago, where we invited residents to come, invited team members to come, and they spoke with a creative agency about what it's like to live at Cedarfield.
Thank you, Laura.
Amy, if you'd like, I'll ask the next question since it's
Great.
for you.
Sure.
Amy, what are the standards for admittance to Cedarfield with regard to both mental and physical ability?
So that's an interesting question. All residents who apply to come and live in independent living are given multiple assessments. First, we gather information from their physician. Then when they come here, they meet with a social worker, a nurse, and the physician who is our medical director. During that time here, we administer both a cognitive test as well as a physical assessment of those residents. Within the last 18 months, and then I pulled some data through Emily yesterday, the last 6 months, the data has proven that we are turning away about 50% of our applicants due to cognition. And I shared that with you because I know that many of you have friends in the community who will eventually like to live here or are thinking about living here. And it's important that for them to know that we do have these guidelines and that they shouldn't wait, because sometimes if you wait too long, you're disappointed with the options that you have, and that's clearly the case of many that we've turned away lately.
Just to reinforce that, Amy did say 50% of the applicants have been turned away. So if you have friends that are saying, I'll come one day may slip away, and they need to be mindful of that as they think about the future as well.
Our next question is for Dan, and then we'll jump back to me. As the population ages and more people are remaining in independent living situations longer, there has become an increased need for assisted living. There has been an increased need for assisted living more so than in the past. What plans are in place or being looked at for increasing the number of assisted living units here at Cedarfield?
So we just added 27, went from 40 apartments to 67 assisted living apartments last summer, actually. Summer before, excuse me. And we have no plans to add additional assisted living apartments at this point in time. And Chris alluded to it, what we do have is our home health organization as well as our affiliation with Functional Pathways, our rehab provider, to backstop that. And living well longer in your home, and that's our plan, and we really believe that will work.
Thank you.
So, an important part to keep in mind with that is because we sell an insurance product, and your life care contract is an insurance product that's governed by the Bureau of Insurance, we rely heavily on an actuary to help us scale and size our assisted living, memory support, and healthcare based on the number of residences we have in independent living. There's a gentleman who, by the name of Mike Hopper, who's a really, really nice guy, but the accountants in the room will tell you that an actuary is an accountant without a sense of humor. And brilliant people who do exceptional work, and Mike does great work for us at Pinnacle Living. He's with a group called A.D. Powell and Associates. And A.D. Powell has helped us scale all of our health services component, memory support, assisted living, and healthcare to future healthcare needs for you all and all future residents. And that's an important piece to keep in mind. Amy, can you talk about where we stand with the software program for family access to resident family access to medical records?
So the timing of this question is impeccable because we just signed a contract last week with a company called IntelliChart. It will take about 6 weeks for us to establish the information and provide them with the data they need to establish our portal. And once that takes place, we'll be working with a small focus group of residents to be our pilot program, to make sure that we're providing the information that we need through that portal and that it's easy to use. So if any of you are interested in volunteering to be on that portal, I suggest you come by our office and let us know. We've already in the back of our mind picked out a few that we think would be ideal in that role.
That's exciting. Amy and I were talking about this earlier, and I have my annual physical next week, so this morning I went to my doctor for blood work. And what frightens me every time is that the information regarding my blood work will probably be available to me digitally tomorrow. But my doctor won't look at it until he walks into the exam room on Thursday morning. So it creates a little apprehension in my mind. So as we work through this, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there, because docs, you'll get the information sometimes before your physician does, and that'll be an interesting piece to grow through. Amy, there seems to be a little confusion concerning the generator. Can you clarify that for us?
I sure will. So we installed a generator about 3 months ago. The generator that is installed services D-Wing and a few other small components. But that process took a little bit longer than we thought it should, and that was because of parts and access to parts. The last piece that we waited for came from Mexico and took about 9 weeks to get. But that generator is up and operating and in use now.
Good, thank you. Same thing about the bus. Can you talk about the purchase of a new vehicle?
Sure. The bus has been a hot topic. I know a lot of you ride the bus to special events and to appointments. We have ordered a new bus. That's in production right now. I know one of the questions I received specifically asked about if that bus will have a lift, and it will. Typically, it takes about 4 to 5 months to get the bus. David is on top of that and is checking regularly, and as soon as it's here, everyone will know, because we'll honk the horn really loud in the circle so you know it's here.
Great. Amy, while we're on that subject, can you talk about upcoming capital improvements, and what are the 2 or 3 largest capital projects that the residents should expect here in the coming months?
So, and thank you for all of you who worked with me through committees for suggestions for upcoming budget and capital expenses in particular. Right now we're focusing on some of the major ones, which is the EFIS project, which will be a multi-year capital project, as well as a 2-way nurse call system. So that will allow our residents to be able to talk to the caregiver as opposed to making the caregiver walk all the way to the room to find out what the need is. We think it's important to be able to have that communication in place. The other really hot topic that I hear from you, whether you like decorating or not, is the need for new carpet in independent living. So that is on our list of major capital items to be replaced, as well as we're closely monitoring the chiller that cools our building, which we were told probably 2 years ago was on its last leg, to ensure that if it does die, we have the funds in place to replace it.
Thank you very much. We are at 12:26 by my watch right now. We still have a couple of more questions, but I'd like to leave a few minutes for any questions that anyone in the room might have. Would that be okay, Amy?
Absolutely.
And I'll be glad to walk the microphone around and do that. Are there any questions that anyone would like to lift up? Wow. Oh, here we go. We'll get the ball rolling here.
What are the plans for improving? What are the plans for improving the internet services in the common areas throughout the building?
Kevin, do you want to address that one? Thank you.
So the question was about the internet and improving in common areas. Mark and I, our director of IT, are beginning to walk the building. We're going to be starting that with our wireless access points in the ceiling. And we've done some replacements in the cottage with our old access points of matching those, but we're going to be beginning that process soon. It will take a little bit, an access point, and making sure the wiring is there and in place. It may take a little bit of time, but we'll keep reporting back to Amy on where we're at, but we are beginning that process as well.
As Kevin mentions wireless access point, if you look up to the ceiling, you see right in the middle along the lights that are too small and going to be replaced hopefully soon, 2 of those boxes are actually wireless access points. And you see those throughout the corridors, hallways, and that sort of thing, and that's what we're going to be upgrading and improving.
What other questions might there be in the audience?
When will we be seeing digital records in independent living healthcare records?
So that's something that we're working on now as well. We feel like that will be something that will probably happen within the next year as well. Thank you for asking that.
Question?
Ask a question about the pool, because I need a warmer pool, I need a therapeutic pool, and I thought when I came and visited here, it was nice and warm. And then when I started using it, it got cooler. When I moved here, it got cooler and cooler. The therapeutic pools, that's Parham had one, and then there is the one at Reynolds Crossing. They keep those about 90, 92, because you can't do but so much in a pool, and it's quite difficult. I can't even get into this one now, it's been so cold. I have not tried it recently, but between 80, 90, and 92 is typical therapeutic pool, not a swimming pool.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The question is about the temperatures of the pool. And actually, I haven't had any concerns brought to me about the temperatures of the pool recently. I know similar to, overcooked or highly seasoned green beans or undercooked green beans, some people have the preference of swimming in a pool that's a little bit cooler, and I'm looking at the person sitting right next to you who does laps every day, Frank Miller. Yeah. So he likes it a little bit cooler than you do. We monitor each of those separately, but sometimes the weather outside has to do with the temperature in the room and how cold the water really appears. But we'll continue to monitor those, and we do record the temperatures on a regular basis so that you can check to make sure it's warm enough. Yeah, we'll talk with Carol about that. Thank you. It looks like Mr. Falls has a question.
This is not a question. I just wanted to say to Chris, to you, to the rest of the staff, what a wonderful opportunity this was. Thank you so very much.
And thank you, Don, for that. We did not pay him for that, nor did he get a monthly fee discount. So we appreciate that. I'd like to end, and we'll all stay here for as long as you would like. Dan and Laura and Kevin and I do have a 2 o'clock appointment, but we're available until then. So if there are other questions that we can get to today, we'll be glad to answer those and address those. But yesterday would have been the 96th birthday of one of my heroes, Dr. King. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. It's about service, and everybody can be great. And when I think of Dr. King sharing this quote, I think of everyone and everything can be great, and everybody can be great, and it's service to others. And as we look at our 300 plus team members who work at Cedarfield, as we look at the care that our healthcare team provides, we were a healthcare provider for the first 60 years of our existence as the Methodist Home and Virginia United Methodist Homes. Today, we're a service provider who provides really good quality care. And this quote means a lot to me, and I just wanted to put that up on the screen and share that with you before we end today. Thank you all for the time today. Amy, thank you and your team for the leadership. Cedarfield is one of my favorite places in the world, and I love being here. Thank you for your time and attention today. We do appreciate it, and have a wonderful day.